Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next function, which is the t function. Now, in the source code here, we're doing something very similar to the previous sections. We're just adding a title, creating an array of examples, and looping through and generating some HTML from those examples. If you want to learn more about the t function, go ahead and visit this page on api.drupal.org. The t function is a deceptively small function name for such a powerful function. What t allows us to do is enable our interface to be translated into any language just by wrapping a function around strings we want to be translated. So, as you'll see in the examples here, all we do is wrap t around our strings. T also provides some additional functionality to add variable placeholders within strings so that we can replace things like variable numbers or user IDs inside of a string without having to worry about the translation around that, because that will be variable. We don't know what that number might be when we're going to output the string. So we can break it down to a translatable string and then use placeholders to replace items in there. So you'll see that as we go through these examples. Okay, here's our first example. We're calling this string, and we're just passing it a very simple string that says I am user number 1. So all we do here is put our string inside of a t function. One thing to keep in mind here is that we want to use strings directly instead of variables. So we could define this string above and say string equals I am user number 1, and then use that string variable inside of here. But the problem with that is that module source code files are parsed out and lists of translatable strings are generated for services that allow people to translate interfaces. So in order to make that process easier, we want to use the string directly inside of the t function. Our next example uses a placeholder. So a placeholder, which we see right here, which is a exclamation mark and UID, signifies a place where we're going to have some type of variable or even maybe a constant in a particular language that shouldn't be translated, replacing out this little bit of text here. So we define it by using an exclamation mark and then the variable using underscores to separate multiple words if there needs to be multiple words. There are actually 3 types of placeholders, so we'll go through the other 2 in the next examples, but the exclamation mark version says that we want to insert this variable as is. We don't want to change anything about it. So a user ID is a safe way to input this kind of data because we know it's safe. Okay, our next example uses a sanitizing placeholder, which is the @ sign. So what we're going to do here to demonstrate this is go to our page that was output here, our tips page, and we're going to click on the query string link. Okay, if we look at the URL, we see that we have a variable called random string, and it's assigned a value of an opening h1 tag or a heading tag, and then some text. Now what we're doing with the placeholder here is we're demonstrating what happens when we take a variable like this, which could have some malicious output or broken output, and sanitize it. So let's scroll down to the t function examples here. And we see here we have a string with a sanitized placeholder. Now we're going to jump back to the code and see how this looks. Okay, right here, string with a sanitized placeholder, which is an @ sign instead of the exclamation mark. So if you need an easy way to remember this, an @ sign is very convoluted. It's got lots of circles, whereas an exclamation mark is straight up and down, very straightforward. Okay, so we're passing a string through a t function that has one placeholder with an @ sign. And then the next parameter that we pass to the t function is an array that contains a set of the placeholders and the values that should replace that placeholder. So in this case, we're using the get global variable to grab a variable from the query string, and we're passing that in to replace this @random placeholder. So what we get when we look at the output is the source code outputted visually, instead of this h1 tag becoming HTML, it's converted to its HTML entities, so it looks just like what the source code would look like. Okay, let's take a look at the third type of placeholder here, string with escaped highlighted placeholder, and we're using the percentage sign for this. So we're passing the t function a string of the random string is random, so we're pulling this random variable again from the get global array, and we're replacing it this time with the percentage sign, which says that we want to escape any HTML. So if there's HTML in it, we're going to make it look like source code instead, and then we're highlighting it. So the way that it's highlighted in this particular theme, if we jump back to the browser, is it's just emphasized, so we see that it's in italics instead.